The luminescent wine swirled in Zax 427's glass, casting prismatic patterns across his private suite aboard the luxury cruiser Star Duchess. The Regellian vintage had cost him a small fortune, but 2 centuries of perfect contracts afforded him such indulgences. In the adjacent room, his latest target lay crystallized in a self-contained stasis field. Another flawless execution. The crime lord had never seen it coming. One moment, he'd been enjoying his weekly mineral bath in his supposedly impregnable fortress. The next, his body had transformed into an elegant crystal sculpture. His final expression, one of sublime relaxation. Zax 427's specialized bioweapons left no trace, no evidence, only beautiful, if macabre, art. Zax 427 extended one of his primary appendages, admiring how the bioluminescent patterns beneath his iridescent exoskeleton shifted with the movement. His Centaurian biology was a masterpiece of evolution, allowing him to alter his physical structure at will. Every species had its tells, its patterns, and after 2 centuries, he had mastered them all. The neural interface embedded in his central nervous system chimed softly, indicating a new contract. He subvocalized the command to display, and the details projected directly onto his retinal membrane. His secondary hearts quickened with interest as he read the parameters. Target: Catherine Kate Anderson. Species: human. Position: Earth Diplomatic Corps, Senior Ambassador to the Galactic Council. Location: Europa Station. Time frame: within 1 standard lunar cycle. Payment: 50 million universal credits. Zax 427's feeding tentacles curled in amusement. The payment was excessive for what appeared to be a simple hit. Humans were young to the galactic stage, barely 2 decades into their membership. Their security systems were primitive, their understanding of spatial dynamics limited. They still relied on physical barriers and energy fields that hadn't been updated in centuries. He accessed the public networks, downloading everything available about his target. Catherine Anderson had risen quickly through Earth's diplomatic ranks, known for her unconventional approaches to interspecies relations. The images showed a female human with auburn hair and what her species considered athletic build. Nothing remarkable. The contract had come through his most exclusive channel, reserved for clients who could afford both his services and their privacy. The source was listed only as Evolutionary Interests, a new entity in his database. Taking another sip of his wine, Zax 427 began his pre-contract ritual. His chamber's environmental controls adjusted, creating a fog of nutrient-rich gases. He extended his sensory filaments, absorbing the minerals he would need for extended shape-shifting. Computer, he vocalized in perfect galactic standard. Display all known security measures for Europa Station, level 1 through 10. The holographic display bloomed before him, showing the sprawling space station's architecture. Europa Station was one of the newer human constructions, built in cooperation with the Galactic Council. Its design showed both human aesthetics and alien practicality, an interesting blend that had earned several architecture awards. As he studied the plans, something nagged at his professional instincts. The payment was too high, the target too simple, the timing too convenient. In 200 years, he had learned that when something seemed too easy, he had usually missed something critical. Still, a contract was a contract. His perfect record had been built on complete professional detachment. Every target was just another assignment, every species just another set of patterns to analyze and exploit. He subvocalized his acceptance of the contract, and the neural interface confirmed the transaction. The crystallized crime lord would be his last job in this sector. Time to move to the human territories. Finishing his wine, Zax 427 activated his suite's recycling protocols. Within minutes, all evidence of his presence would be reduced to base atomic components. As his ship's AI plotted a course to Europa Station, he began the initial phase of his shape-shifting. Time to learn what it felt like to move in a human form. He had no way of knowing that this simple contract would shatter 2 centuries of perfect performance, or that it would lead him to question everything he thought he knew about his place in the galaxy. Europa Station's central promenade bustled with life from 100 different worlds, but Zax 427's attention remained fixed on the small coffee shop across the artificial stream. His current form, that of a modest Proximan merchant, drew no attention as he pretended to read market reports on his datapad. According to every intelligence source, Catherine Anderson bought her morning beverage here at precisely 7:30 station time every single day. Except today, she hadn't appeared. His biochemical chronometer marked 8:47, and still no sign of his target. The shop's automated barista had already prepared and recycled her usual order 3 times, following its programming. Zax 427's feeding tentacles, currently disguised as a traditional Proximan beard, twitched with irritation. A chime from his neural interface provided the answer. Anderson had taken the emergency stairs from her quarters to the lower levels, citing a random security exercise. The action made no logical sense. The quantum tube system was faster, safer, and standard protocol for all diplomatic staff. Zax 427 abandoned his post, shifting through the crowd as he made his way to the lower levels. He'd spent 3 days studying human physical parameters, but something was wrong with his mimicry attempts. Each time he tried to assume a human form, his molecular structure became unstable. It was as if their genetic code refused to hold still long enough for him to copy it. He found her in the hydroponics section. Of all places, Catherine Anderson stood before a display of earth plants, her auburn hair caught in the artificial sunlight as she spoke with a station botanist. She was supposed to be in Legislative Session 47B, according to her schedule. "The roses remind me of my grandmother's garden," she was saying, her hand touching one of the red blooms. "She always said you could judge the health of any society by how well they tended their gardens." The botanist, a serpentine medusan, fluttered their sensory fronds in agreement. "These specimens have adapted remarkably well to station conditions, much like your species, Ambassador Anderson." Her laugh echoed through the chamber. "Please, call me Kate. And yes, we humans are rather good at making ourselves at home anywhere." Zax 427 added the interaction to his growing database of anomalies. In the past week, he'd watched Anderson skip her regular appointments to help a lost child find their parent, take an impromptu dancing lesson from a centennial ceremonial master, and spend 3 hours debugging a maintenance bot because, in her words, it looked lonely. None of it made sense. Every other species he'd studied had clear behavioral patterns, cultural constants that could be predicted and exploited. But humans, they seemed to delight in disrupting their own routines. His neural interface flashed a warning. His Proximan form was beginning to destabilize from prolonged use. He retreated to a private alcove, shifting back to his base Centaurian structure with an uncomfortable ripple of molecules. The interface projected his latest analysis of human genetic samples. Their DNA should have been simple to copy. It was far less complex than many species he'd successfully mimicked. Yet something about their genetic structure seemed to actively resist duplication. It was almost as if a new alert interrupted his thoughts. Anderson had left the hydroponics section and was now in the station's waste reclamation unit. The logs showed she'd received no alert, no emergency call. She'd simply decided to tour the facility because, according to her public schedule update, "I've always wondered how it works." Zax 427's primary heart throbbed with frustration. In 2 centuries of contracts, he'd never encountered a target so maddeningly random. Humans didn't just break patterns, they seemed fundamentally incapable of maintaining them. He needed a new approach. Traditional surveillance and pattern recognition weren't working. Perhaps it was time to embrace some chaos of his own. As he watched Anderson emerge from the reclamation unit, enthusiastically discussing filtration systems with the bewildered staff, Zax 427 made a decision that would change everything. He would have to think like a human. Zax 427's private research chamber aboard his cloaked ship pulsed with holographic displays, each one showing a different facet of human history. He'd spent the last 3 days here, absorbing everything he could find about these impossible creatures. His neural interface struggled to process the sheer volume of contradictions. "Display historical survival statistics," he commanded, his voice rough from disuse. The central hologram shifted, showing Earth's timeline. Other species had evolved in stable environments. The Medusans in their gentle seas, the Proximans in their ordered forests. But humans, they'd survived ice ages, meteors, supervolcanoes, and their own nuclear weapons. Cross-reference, species adaptation rates. The display split, comparing human evolution with other races. Most species took millions of years to adapt to minor environmental changes. Humans had gone from cave paintings to quantum computing in less than 10,000 years. His secondary heart skipped a beat when he found the medical records. Human bodies were constantly fighting their own cellular structure, killing and replacing millions of cells daily. Their immune systems waged endless war against microscopic invaders, evolving new defenses in real time. No wonder his shape-shifting failed. How could he copy a form that never stopped changing? A message alert flashed. Another missed opportunity to eliminate Anderson. She'd skipped a high-security diplomatic dinner because a junior staff member had received bad news from home. Instead of networking with Galactic elite, she'd spent the evening sharing something called ice cream and listening to the young humans' stories about their mother. Zax 427 added the incident to his growing list of human behavioral anomalies. The action made no political sense, gained her no advantage. Yet somehow, the next day, the entire junior staff had worked at 130% efficiency, their loyalty to Anderson visibly strengthened. "Access entertainment archives," he ordered, following a new hunch. The chamber filled with human stories. Their fiction. His feeding tentacles curled in shock as he absorbed the contents. Every other species created art about things that had happened, or things that could realistically happen. Humans imagined impossible worlds, wrote songs about events that never occurred, created entire universes inside their minds for fun. They called it creativity. His species called it madness. Yet as he dug deeper, patterns emerged, not in their actions, but in their reactions. Humans didn't follow predictable paths, but they did follow consistent values. Loyalty, compassion, curiosity, innovation. Their chaos had purpose. His neural interface pinged with new data about Anderson. She'd just approved an unprecedented trade agreement with the Medusans, completely restructuring the standard template mid-negotiation, because, in her words, the old way doesn't serve either of our people's best interests. The Medusans, known for their rigid adherence to protocol, had actually agreed. More than that, they'd praised her refreshing perspective. Zax 427 leaned back in his adaptation cradle, his bioluminescent patterns swirling with deep thought. He'd been approaching this all wrong. Anderson's unpredictability wasn't a bug in the system. It was the system. A new alert caught his attention. His high-level security slice had found something odd in the contract's origin data. The payment source, evolutionary interests, had been routed through 17 different shell companies. Standard practice for his work, but these companies had all been created within the last solar day. His primary heart froze. In 2 centuries, he'd never bothered to question his client's motives, But something about this contract felt different. Why would someone pay such an enormous sum to eliminate a single human diplomat? What made Catherine Anderson so dangerous that she needed to die? The answer had to be in the data. He began a deeper analysis of the contract's source code, his suspicion growing. As his decryption programs ran, he found himself hoping, for the first time in his career, that he would find a reason not to kill his target. The encryption broke at 300 station time, flooding Zax 427's neural interface with data that made his 3 hearts stop in sequence. His private chamber, usually lit by the soft glow of his bioluminescence, now pulsed red with emergency alerts as the truth about his employers finally emerged. The Vorkath weren't supposed to exist. Every historical database listed them as extinct, wiped out in the Great Collapse 12,000 years ago. Yet here was their signature code, hidden in layers of quantum encryption. The same code he'd seen fragments of throughout his career. Display contract history, last 2 centuries. He commanded, his feeding tentacles writhing with growing horror. The holographic display filled with his previous assignments. Each one had seemed random, unconnected. A corporate leader here, a religious figure there, a scientific pioneer somewhere else. But viewed together, through the lens of his new understanding, a pattern emerged. Every target had been about to disrupt the status quo. Every death had nudged galactic society back toward predictable, controllable paths. He'd been their instrument, their perfect tool for maintaining order. His secondary heart nearly seized when he found the probability matrices. The Vorkath had mapped every species development, calculating their decisions centuries in advance. Their models could predict everything from individual choices to societal shifts with 99.99% accuracy. Everything except humans. The human section of their database was a chaos of fractaling possibilities. Every time the Vorkath's algorithms tried to plot humanity's course, the predictions shattered into countless alternative paths. They'd run billions of simulations, yet couldn't predict what a single human would choose for breakfast tomorrow. Catherine Anderson's file was the largest, marked with urgent priority tags. Zax 427 dove into the data, finally understanding why she'd been targeted. She was close, so close, to discovering the truth. Her random tours of station facilities had been anything but random. Each one had brought her closer to finding evidence of the Vorkath's hidden influence. A new alert flashed. Anderson was on the move. At 300, she should be asleep according to human biological patterns. Instead, she was in the station's restricted archives, her security clearance opening files that had been sealed for centuries. Zax 427 watched through the security feeds as she connected the same dots he had. Her auburn hair was disheveled, her eyes bright with the thrill of discovery as she dug through ancient records. She'd found the pattern hidden in medieval church architecture, of all places, a pattern that matched the quantum signature of Vorkath technology. His interface chimed with a priority update from his employers. They were activating other agents. 3 more assassins, all heading for Europa Station. The Vorkath weren't taking any chances. If he failed, Anderson would face multiple killers. The reality of his situation hit him like a plasma burst. For the first time in 2 centuries, he had a choice to make. He could complete his contract, maintain his perfect record, and help the Vorkath continue their grand manipulation of galactic society. Or he could do something truly unpredictable. The security feed showed Anderson making another intuitive leap, finding a connection no one had seen in 12 millennia. She discovered how the Vorkath had survived the Great Collapse by hiding in plain sight, becoming living code in the galaxy's computer systems. She was brilliant, dangerous, completely uncontrollable. Just like her entire species, Zax 427 made his decision. His perfect record would end tonight, but perhaps that was the most perfect choice of all. He began preparing his infiltration gear. not to kill Catherine Anderson, but to save her. The Vorkath had spent 12,000 years promoting order through death. Perhaps it was time for some human-style chaos to enter the equation. The archive section of Europa Station hummed with ancient servers and quantum storage banks. Catherine Anderson sat surrounded by holographic displays, her hair pulled back in a messy knot as she traced patterns that had remained hidden for millennia. She didn't look up when Zax 427 materialized from the shadows. "I was beginning to think you'd never make your move," she said, still focused on the display. "You've been watching me for 2 weeks. That's longer than most assassins last." Zax 427 froze, his camouflage systems stuttering in surprise. "You knew." Hard to miss a Proximan merchant who doesn't haggle, a Medusan chef who never tastes his food, and a maintenance bot that actually followed its programming schedule. She finally turned, meeting his true Centaurian form without flinching. "You're good, but humans, we notice the little things that don't fit." His feeding tentacles rippled with appreciation. She'd spotted his disguises through their very perfection. The coffee shop schedule was a trap. Among others, she gestured to the files around her. Just like these archives were a trap for something bigger. The Vorkath have been sloppy lately. They're not used to dealing with species they can't predict. Zax 427 moved closer, his bioluminescent patterns shifting to match the archive's ambient lighting. 3 more assassins are coming. Professional courtesy. I thought you should know. Catherine. Kate. Laughed, the sound echoing off ancient data cores. Only 3. I must be losing my touch. She tapped a display, bringing up a complex network of connected events. Look at this. Every major galactic decision for the past 12,000 years. Wars, peace treaties, technological advances, all guided by targeted assassinations. All guided by my contracts, Zax 427 admitted. Though I never saw the pattern until now. That's the thing about patterns. Kate stood, walking through the holographic web of history. Humans are really good at seeing them, but we're even better at breaking them. The Vorkath can't stand that. We're the first species they've encountered that actually embraces chaos. A warning flashed across his neural interface. The other assassins had entered the station. "We don't have much time. Why are you showing me this?" "Because you're different." She turned to face him fully. 200 years of perfect kills, never a question asked. Then you meet humans, and suddenly you are spending weeks studying us instead of completing your contract. You're curious. That makes you dangerous to them. His primary heart raced as the pieces clicked together. The contract price was too high. Because it wasn't just for me. Kate's eyes gleamed with understanding. It was for you too. You're as much a target as I am. The moment you started questions their patterns, you became a liability. The archive's security systems pinged. Someone was overriding the door controls. Zax 427's combat reflexes kicked in as he assessed their options. 3 exits, 2 already compromised according to his sensors. The ventilation system would be watched. "I have a ship," he offered. "Cloaked, ready for emergency departure. And I have the complete database of Vorkath operations, including their current infiltration points in every major government." She held up a quantum storage crystal. "Want to help me save the galaxy?" The door's security systems failed with a soft chime. They had seconds at most. Zax 427 made the most human decision of his life. He improvised. His form flowed around Kate like living mercury, creating a perfect camouflage shield. "The maintenance tunnels," he whispered. "There's a path they won't expect. Because it's completely illogical and potentially suicidal." She grinned inside his protective embrace. "Now you're thinking like a human." Together, they slipped into the shadows as the archive doors slid open. For the first time in 2 centuries, Zax 427 had no plan, no pattern to follow. And somehow, that felt exactly right. The maintenance tunnels of Europa Station were never meant for a Centaurian and a human to navigate at full speed. Steam hissed from ancient pipes, and the metallic floor rang with their footsteps as Kate and Zax 427 raced through the labyrinth of service corridors. "Left here," Kate called out, her voice barely audible over the station's industrial heartbeat. "The secondary cooling system has a maintenance hub we can use." Zax 427's neural interface flashed warning after warning. The other assassins were splitting up, covering all possible escape routes. Their thermal scanners would soon pick up Kate's heat signature, even through his camouflage field. They burst into the hub, a cathedral-like space filled with towering coolant tanks and humming processors. Kate immediately headed for the central console, her fingers flying over the controls. "They'll have this place locked down in minutes," Zax 427 warned, his feeding tentacles extended to their full sensor range. "We need to keep moving. Just give me 30 seconds. Kate's eyes never left the screen as she worked. "The Vorkath think they're the only ones who can see patterns. Watch this." The hub's lighting suddenly shifted, and alarms began blaring throughout the station. Kate's fingers danced across one final command sequence, and the environmental systems through the entire deck went haywire. "What did you do?" Zax 427 asked, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing with curiosity. "Created chaos." She grinned, looking more alive than ever. "Every environmental system is now reporting different emergency conditions. Steam leaks, pressure drops, temperature spikes. All false alarms, but the station's safety protocols have to respond to each one." Understanding dawned in his secondary brain. "You're overwhelming their search patterns." Humans learned long ago that sometimes the best way to hide is to create so much noise that the signal gets lost. She pulled the quantum storage crystal from her pocket, the one containing all their evidence. "Now, about that ship of yours." A plasma burst scorched the wall where Kate's head had been a second earlier. Zax 427 moved without thinking, his body flowing around her as a living shield. The assassin who'd shot at them was Silurian, their scaled form almost invisible in the steam. "Heretic," the Silurian hissed at Zax 427. "You betray 2 centuries of perfect service for this chaos species." More shots came from different angles. The other 2 assassins had arrived. Kate and Zax 427 dove behind a coolant tank, their breaths mingling in the humid air. "You have a plan?" she asked, seemingly unfazed by their dire situation. "Besides keeping you alive?" "Not really." He found himself admiring how calm she remained. "I'm still new to this whole improvisation thing." Kate reached into her boot and pulled out a small device. "Then let me teach you lesson 1 of human chaos theory. Sometimes the best defense is a really good distraction." She threw the device into the center of the hub. It burst with a blinding flash and an electromagnetic pulse that sent every system into cascade failure. In the darkness that followed, only Zax 427's natural bioluminescence provided any light. "The backup systems will engage in 40 seconds, she said, already moving. "The assassin's targeting systems will be offline for 30 of those seconds. Still remember the way to your ship." His feeding tentacles curled in amusement. "I never forget a path, once I've taken it." "Good." She grabbed his primary appendage, the touch sending strange signals through his nervous system. "Because when those lights come back on, we're going to need to run like hell." As they raced through the darkness, Zax 427 felt something shift in his understanding of the universe. The Vorkath had spent millennia creating perfect order through death, but here was a human, offering him a different path, one of life through chaos. "Why trust me?" he asked as they ran. "I was sent to kill you." Kate's laugh echoed through the dark corridor. Because everyone deserves a chance to choose their own path. Even assassins, especially assassins who start asking the right questions. For the first time in his long life, Zax 427 understood the true power of human unpredictability. It wasn't just their actions that were chaotic. It was their capacity for forgiveness, their ability to see possibility where others saw only threat. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council sparkled with crystalline chandeliers and floating holocrons as representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered for the emergency session. Kate Anderson stood at the podium, her diplomatic uniform pristine, despite their recent chase through Europa Station's maintenance tunnels. Zax 427 watched from the shadows of the upper gallery, his form currently mimicking one of the Council's service drones. His neural interface tracked multiple threats. The three assassins had somehow made it through security, each taking position around the chamber. Members of the Council, Kate's voice rang clear through the vast space. I come before you today with evidence of a conspiracy that spans 12,000 years. The chamber's ambient noise dropped to almost nothing. Even the perpetually arguing delegates of the Rimward systems fell silent. The Great Collapse was not a natural event. She continued, activating the central holographic display. It was engineered by a species we thought extinct, the Vorkath. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the assembly. Zax 427 noticed the Silurian assassin shifting position, moving for a better shot. His own targeting systems calculated 17 different ways to stop the kill. But Kate had asked him to wait. Trust me, she'd said during their planning session. Sometimes the best way to spring a trap is to look like you're walking right into it. The holographic display filled with data, centuries of assassination contracts, including his own. Patterns of political manipulation became clear as Kate highlighted key deaths and their subsequent effects on galactic politics. The Vorkath didn't die out, she explained. They evolved, became living code within our computer systems, guiding our development through carefully orchestrated chaos. Movement caught his eye. The second assassin, a shapeshifter like himself, was now disguised as a Medusan delegate. The third had taken position near the emergency exits. But their perfect system had one flaw, Kate said, her eyes meeting his across the chamber. They never accounted for human unpredictability. That was the signal. Zax 427 dropped his drone disguise just as the Silurian assassin fired. His tentacles lashed out, deflecting the plasma burst into the ceiling. The chamber erupted into chaos. Security breach. The automated systems wailed. Force fields snapped into place around the delegates as guards poured in. But Kate didn't miss a beat. Notice how they attack now, when the truth is about to be revealed. She called out over the commotion. Watch their patterns. The shapeshifter assassin lunged for her, but Kate was already moving. She predicted their attack patterns, using their own precision against them. She rolled under the shapeshifter's grasp, coming up with a small device in her hand. Now, Zax, she shouted. He triggered his specialized bioweapons, not to kill this time, but to reveal. The chamber's air filled with a fine mist that made computer code visible. And there, floating among the delegates, were the distinct patterns of Vorkath programming. They're among us right now, Kate announced, activating her device. A pulse of energy shot through the chamber, forcing the ancient code to take physical form. The delegates gasped as ethereal figures materialized. The Vorkath in their true form, living information given shape by Kate's technology. The assassins froze, their programming conflicting with this unexpected development. You see, Kate's voice carried through the stunned silence. They've been hiding in plain sight, using assassins like my friend here to maintain their control. But today, we choose a different path. Today, we choose freedom through chaos rather than control through death. The Vorkath programs tried to flee back into the station's systems, but Kate's device had sealed their access. The assassins, their masters exposed, found themselves surrounded by Council security. Zax 427 moved to Kate's side, his bioluminescent patterns glowing with pride. Together, they'd done the impossible, broken a pattern that had lasted 12 millennia. "Not bad for a chaos species," he said. Kate's grin was fierce and beautiful. "Just wait until they see what else we can do." 6 months after the Vorkath revelation, Zax 427 stood in his new office in the heart of New York's Quantum District, watching the morning traffic weave impossible patterns through the crystalline spires. Flying vehicles darted between buildings in ways that would have given any traffic eye a nervous breakdown. Yet somehow, the human pilots made it work. His communication interface chimed with another request for his services. The message came from the Proximate High Council. They wanted his new company, Adaptive Security Solutions, to help reform their entire defense strategy. Add them to the waiting list, he told his assistant, a young human named Marcus, who had a particular talent for creative problem-solving. After the Medusans, but before the Rimward Collective. "That's a 6-month wait," Marcus noted, his dark eyes twinkling. "They're not going to like that. They'll adapt." Zax 427's feeding tentacles curled in what he'd learned was the human expression of amusement. That's rather the point. His neural interface projected the morning's news updates. The galaxy was changing faster than anyone had predicted, except perhaps the humans. With the Vorkath's rigid control gone, species were finally free to evolve along their own paths. The Medusans had started an experimental art movement. The Silurians were revolutionizing their ancient social hierarchy. Even his own people, the Centaurians, were exploring new forms of physical expression through their shape-shifting abilities. A priority message flashed across his display. Kate Anderson, now Earth's Special Ambassador for Interspecies Innovation. His primary heart beat faster as her hologram materialized in his office. "Good morning, my favorite ex-assassin," she said, her auburn hair now streaked with strands of silver that somehow made her look even more distinguished. "Ready for some chaos?" "Always." He shifted his form to match her professional attire, though he kept his natural bioluminescence, a style choice that had become quite popular among the young Centaurians. "What's the crisis this time?" The Rimward Collective found something in their deep space surveys, a signal that doesn't match any known pattern. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. "They want us to help investigate." "Us?" His secondary heart skipped a beat. "I'm a security consultant now, Kate, not a deep space explorer." "You're the best pattern analyst in the galaxy," she countered. "And more importantly, you know how to think outside those patterns. Besides, Marcus can handle the office for a few weeks." Marcus gave a thumbs up from his desk, not even trying to pretend he hadn't been listening. Zax 427 considered the proposal. 6 months ago, he would have analyzed every variable, calculated every risk. Now he found himself doing something very human, going with his gut. "When do we leave?" Kate's smile lit up the room. "Transport leaves in 2 hours. Pack light and bring your sense of adventure." After she signed off, Zax 427 spent a moment looking at the city below. Humans had changed everything. Not through force or control, but through their wonderful, unpredictable chaos. They'd taught the galaxy that true evolution came not from following patterns, but from breaking them. "Marcus," he called out, "cancel my meetings for the next month, and send a message to all our clients." What should it say? Zax 427's bioluminescent patterns shifted to a bright, excited blue. "Tell them their security consultant is taking a page from the human handbook. He's going exploring." His perfect record as an assassin was long gone, but he'd found something better. a perfect partnership with the most chaotic species in the galaxy. Whatever this new signal was, whatever patterns it might hold, he knew one thing for certain. With humans involved, it would be anything but predictable. And that, he'd learned, was exactly how the universe was meant to be.